Yeah, we can start.
Welcome to the 11th session of International Certificate Program on Human Resource Management for Excellence. Today, we have with us Dr. Gabriel Warren, and he is going to deliver on the topic Managing Remote Work. Dr. Warren is the MBA Program Director and an Assistant Professor of Marketing at Bemidji State University, USA. Prior to transitioning into higher education, Doctor Warren spent 12 years working in industry in the capacity of sales, sales management, and marketing roles. He has presented at several professional academic conferences along with being published in peer-reviewed journal articles in the business disciplines of marketing and management. Dr. Warren, we welcome you to the August platform. Before requesting Dr. Warren to deliver his address, I would request all participants to please keep their audio and video off throughout the session, and also please do not have access to the present screen option. Please. Dr. Warren, you may now please continue.
Okay. All right. So thanks for having me. I am going to get my PowerPoint here pulled up and we will get started that way. So can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes, it's visible. You may now continue.
All right, thank you. So today I am going to, just kind of be sharing a little bit from my experiences as it relates to, being a remote worker, one as an employee, but also as a manager. So kind of as we mentioned before, I have been basically working for the past 5 years in a remote or hybrid setting. So I have spent the past 5 years either managing employees or being an employee working in a remote environment. One of the big things I like to kind of highlight before we start is just some of the things that I've done as it relates to being a manager. I've managed as many as 75 remote employees. Half of those were full-time employees, whereas half of them were part-time employees. And just being able to kind of understand how to relate to all 75 employees, given that none of them were working in the office with me every day. Also, as an employee, I have been teaching for, like I said, over the past 5 years. Some of them have been in remote environments where I've been on the other side as an employee and being able to just learn how to be a part of the team and be productive and things like that. So that kind of gives you a little bit of background that a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be coming from my background as being an employee, as well as also managing a large group of employees in a remote setting. So for today's agenda, we're gonna kind of cover a few things. There's kind of a lot of information, so I'll try to go through it kind of quickly so that we can get to the questions part. But we're gonna start out by just kind of hitting on the impact of remote workers. Then I'm gonna talk about some benefits of remote work and kind of why people are kind of going to that now. Then I'm gonna be looking at some strategies that you can use to help with managing remote workers. And then we'll kind of wrap up with the question and answer. All right, so we'll kind of get started with the impact of remote workers. So a lot of people, prior to the recent happenings with the global pandemic, a lot of people felt as if remote work was more of a trend or something that might not last for the long haul. However, because of the recent happenings with the health crisis and everybody kind of trying to figure out how to continue to be productive and to continue to service clients and customers, it has kind of pushed remote work up into the forefront, probably sooner than what it would have done before. So over the past couple of years, there has been a more of a realization that remote work is no longer a trend. It's something that's here to stay. In the United States here, there was a company called the Kong Group who basically surveyed over 500 companies that were either venture-backed companies from venture capitalists or companies that have been started and they've grown to a level where they do global business. And out of those 500 companies, 70% of those founders have reported that their offices will be continuing to work remotely even after the global pandemic is over. So they've started to be able to see the benefits of how individual employees working remotely can lend itself to a lot of positive things and positive results, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Of those 500 companies that were also surveyed, 76% of the owners, they also reported that the productivity levels went up. So not only were they noticing that it was a good benefit for their companies to have remote employees, but they've also noticed that there's been an increase in the amount of productivity that has gone to play when it comes down to just the way employees work and the way that they're able to get things done. So there's also been a few large tech companies that have also pivoted to remote work and have plans to actually continue the remote work even after we get things solved with the global pandemic. Some examples of those companies are Facebook. Facebook has announced that they're going to continue to migrate most of their employees into a remote world. Even over the next 5 to 10 years, they said they're going to be continuing to reevaluate their business model to make sure that there's more employees who are able to work remotely. Google is also another company, the social media platform Twitter, and then also Square, which is the company that basically does merchant services and things like that, are just a few of the tech giants who have decided that they're going to make the transition to look at more long-term remote environments. And then another impact that remote workers have is that it does allow for a little bit greater collaboration. So you can start to span out beyond just your geographical area or even your, maybe your financial industry, and kind of get into more of working together, shared workspace, things like that. So here are some benefits. So one of the benefits of having remote employees and remote work is that it does help to increase employee work-life balance. And this is probably a very important point because it talks to how employers can really kind of help to allow their employees know how much we value them as managers. The way that it helps to increase work-life balance for employees is a lot of times employees, when they're working remotely, they have a little bit of flexibility to be able to fit their work lives around their family schedules. So if they're having to interact with maybe say kids, or maybe if they have elderly parents that are at home, if they have other obligations that they're having to kind of juggle between work, then remote work gives all of us as employees and employers, a chance for our employees to be able to do some of those things maybe that they wouldn't be able to do if they were working at a traditional office setting, and not have to have that added stress that could actually impact productivity when you're looking at it from a long haul. The other benefit is it does increase creativity and innovation by employees. So oftentimes we do not always get our best and most creative ideas only during work hours. So when we think about the way we work, say if we were all working, 8 in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that's typically when most people, at least here in the United States, are working. However, sometimes creative ideas come to us when we may be out, maybe walking in the park, or maybe if we're interacting with family, or maybe if we're, golfing or doing something that may be non-traditional. It allows for us to kind of have our creative juices flowing a little bit. So having remote employees, it gives employees the opportunity and the space to be able to always kind of be thinking about work, and ideas can come to them even if they're like at a coffee shop, or say if they're at a park and they're working. Then it just helps to help employees to feel more creative, and it can kind of lend itself to new ideas and new partnerships and things like that. The third benefit will be that it helps to lower overhead costs for the company. So when we think about overhead costs, we think about things that, businesses, we have to provide for our employees on a regular basis. So our power bills or our utility bills at the office, they should go down if we have a large percentage of our employees working remotely. Also things such as office supplies, your paper, your staplers, your writing utensils, even things like toilet paper, or if you as an organization, if your company provides things like coffee and juice or soda for your employees when they go to the break room, all of those things are costs that's associated with having employees in the office on a regular basis. Whereas if they were remote employees, that could reduce the cost that you have as an employer around those types of things. Then you move on to, a remote work allows you to leverage your employees to expand your company footprint. So say if you are maybe a smaller organization and you have all your employees working in that one building, but you have aspiration to expand, going to a remote environment or allowing some employees to have remote ability, then that would allow for your company to be able to expand. Your company goes where your employees go. So when you are in a place where, say you are in one geographical area and you're able to start hiring employees who may be able to do work for your company, say in a different geographical area, then they can start to help to promote your company and your company's brand in the geographical area that they're in. And that helps to expand the company's footprint. Also, those employees could help to maybe prospect new clients, or help to get the company out in that geographical area, and it helps your business to be able to expand in areas where maybe you weren't thinking about moving into those specific geographical areas. So that's a big benefit. And then the last benefit is just increasing the hiring of a variety of skill sets. So say if you are in a geographical area and it is a big area for, I'll just use the financial services industry. Like here in the United States, I used to live in an area that was heavily populated with the banking and the financial services industry. And a lot of people in that industry or in that city, they had experience in banking and financial services. However, if we wanted to try to find out how to connect with someone who may be good at marketing or who may be good at accounting, we may have to look outside of our geographical area. So allowing remote work to kind of come into play, it will help us able to hire individuals who may have a different skill set, who may be in a different area. For instance, if I was looking in the United States for someone who was really good at technology and IT, then the geographical area I'm in, we're not necessarily known for that. So I can go and hire someone who maybe in California and in the Silicon Valley region of our country, and be able to utilize their skill set, even though I'm in the Midwest. So it just kind of helps to be able to branch out and hire a variety of skill sets. So now we're going to move on to some strategies of how to manage remote work. So there's 5 strategies that I'm going to basically kind of hit on over the next several slides. I'm going to talk about offering flexibility as a strategy, having effective communication, creating virtual team building opportunities, having regularly scheduled meetings with employees and employers, and then being able to celebrate your employees. So to kind of get us started, we're going to kick it off with offering flexibility. So the first strategy of making sure that we are having an effective remote employee environment is to be able to offer some level of flexibility. So kind of like what I mentioned before, it helps to, remote work helps to give employees an opportunity to not only fit their schedule into work, but also to be their most creative. A couple of things that we had done here when I was managing people as an employer, is I allowed for what I call sliding schedule or sliding start times for your employees. So for instance, if your operation or your company normally does business between the hours of 7 a.m. and say 5 or 6 p.m., instead of me requiring all of my employees to be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, then basically I would have sliding start times for employees. And it would kind of go something like this. They would be able to choose the time they want to get to work. So between 7 o'clock in the morning, and I may cut it off at 10 o'clock in the morning, they have to arrive at sometime between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. And depending on when they arrive, determines when they leave in the evening. So if someone, say, comes to work at 7 in the morning, they may get to leave work at 4 p.m., whereas someone who comes in at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, they may not get to leave work until 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. in the afternoon. So it gives them an opportunity, say, for instance, if someone has a doctor's appointment or someone has their children have a doctor appointment, and say that appointment is at 8 o'clock in the morning, they don't have to worry about calling into work to request to be coming in late or to put in some time off for some vacation time. They can just go ahead and go to their appointment at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. When that appointment is done, they can come to work at 9, knowing that they're going to be working until probably 6 o'clock in the afternoon or 6:30, just depending on what time they get there. But this kind of takes the pressure off of the employees feeling like they have to be to work at a certain time every single day. And also it takes the stress off the manager from having to keep track of what's happening with their employees and why they may not be getting work at a certain time. It's just a matter of providing that flexibility. Also, our flexibility allows us as employers to show our employees that we care and that we're being empathetic. There is a popular saying that I use a lot, and the saying is, people don't want to know, don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. So that just basically means that if I'm an employee, I don't necessarily want to know, or I don't care about how much knowledge you have as a manager or as a leader within the organization until I know how much you care about me as an employee and as an individual. So that motto is just something that I normally use to remind myself that before I can spend, all this time really trying to coach individuals and develop them and really try to help them in their careers, first they have to know how much I care about them before they want to know the knowledge that I have to share with them and give them. And that comes from, just being empathetic, and offering flexibility is a way that we can, as managers and as leaders within our organizations, that's a way for us to be able to actually show that we are being empathetic to our employees. Another thing that flexibility provides is it gives us as managers and as leaders the opportunity to basically set some realistic expectations for response times when we're communicating with our employees, which I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. But one of the things I really want to highlight on this point is that, oftentimes when we are working remotely, we do not always communicate well as leaders or managers that response times may be different, because if we're offering this flexibility to our employees, we may not be able to put the same level of expectations on remote employees that we would on an employee who's coming to the office every day. So having that conversation about how quickly are we expecting a response if we send an email, or how quickly are we expecting the employees to get work completed and get back to us is really important around having this remote work environment and being able to offer flexibility. That's something that we have to keep in mind. And then the final thing about offering flexibility that you want to kind of keep in mind is that everybody is on different levels and different points of the spectrum. So you may have people during this time who may be totally new to working in a remote environment, and they are really going to have a learning curve, and they have to kind of, have some time to build up to being a good remote employee. But then you may have people who've been doing it for a little while, and they kind of know and understand what it's like to be a remote employee. And then you have people who are very advanced. They've probably been doing it for a while. They were not affected much by, the way we're having to do things now with, the global pandemic going on. So just kind of reminding ourselves as leaders that we will have people that are on every different point of the spectrum. And even us ourselves as managers and as leaders, we have to be flexible with ourselves and knowing that there may be some things about our work environment that we have to learn and we have to develop in. So being flexible with ourselves is also a very important point that I want to highlight. The next strategy is having some effective communication. So I kind of hit up on this a little bit, and I wanted to go in depth with it on this slide. But first, I want to start by just talking about what is effective communication, or how is that defined as it relates to my presentation. And the definition that I'm using is effective communication is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information, or to express your ideas, thoughts, or feelings to someone else. So basically, if I have an idea or if I have a message that I'm wanting to communicate from myself to another individual, effective communication means that I'm able to do that in a way that the message that I created and the message that I intend to send is what the receiver gets, and that's how they're able to comprehend it and understand it in the way that I intended it to be understood. So that is very important, because there was a recent study done in the United States where there was 400 corporations that were surveyed. And out of those 400 corporations, they employed over 100,000 individuals in both the United States and the UK. And based off of communication and communication barriers that were happening within those 400 organizations, there was estimated that there was an average cost of over $62.4 million lost per year in productivity costs. So because communication wasn't as effective in those areas, then it caused that amount of financial loss to those 400 organizations that employed 100,000 people within the United States and the UK. So I hope that helps to paint the picture of how important it is for organizations to basically make sure that they're developing effective communication strategies. So one of those strategies when we're dealing with remote employees to help to build that effective communication is, like I mentioned earlier, having a good plan to where we are able to communicate with our employees whatever our expectations are. We do not want to not communicate as effectively with our employees to a point where they start to feel like they're being left out. They start to develop a lack of trust between themselves and the organization, which that could also lead to a lack of productivity because they're unsure about maybe the direction of the company or the things that need to be happening as it relates to being in regular communication with your employees. So that is definitely something that you want to make sure you keep in mind. So when you're trying to effectively communicate, a couple of things you want to do is, one is you want to give your whole attention. And when I mean give your whole attention, think about maybe when you've had some meetings via Google Meets like we're doing here today, or say if you were using other things like maybe Zoom or some other type of platform, Skype, that you were having a virtual meeting. And oftentimes you may see individuals who may be looking off the screen, or maybe they're looking like they're maybe on their cellular devices, or maybe typing up an email and they're not giving their full attention. In order to try to help with building effective communication, you want to try to get everybody's commitment to give their whole attention. Make sure that they are, fully focused, looking into the monitor. They are, giving their undivided attention to whoever's speaking at that moment, so that they can properly process the information that is being given. So that is definitely an important part. Also, a part of giving your whole attention is make sure when people are talking and communicating, then as a receiver, you're nodding, you're letting them know that you understand what they're saying, and you're giving them feedback to let them know that, yes, I understand and I receive the information that you are sharing with me. It just gives everyone that visual appearance there. Another aspect of effective communication is being aware of your body language. And a lot of times we don't always think about that when we are interacting with someone in a virtual environment. But having remote workers and being able to communicate with individuals through, devices and things like that, it can really be important to keep in mind that our body language is very important. So oftentimes when we're in remote settings, our body language is heightened more so than if we're maybe meeting in an office setting, because now everyone is looking at each other through a computer lens or some kind of form of technology. So there are a couple of things that we want to do to try to help with building positive body language, so that it helps to make sure that we're effectively able to communicate and is received in a good way. One thing is you want to be able to smile often. So when you are communicating through, computers and different types of platforms, make sure you smile, because it helps to keep people's attention on you as the presenter, and it gives them an opportunity to see you and to see that you are, enjoying presenting and enjoying the time that you have to present. Another thing is to keep your arms from being uncrossed. So similar to when you're actually meeting with someone in an office setting, if you're having your arms crossed and maybe you're sitting back, then it kind of puts out the image that you're not interested in the presentation or what the information is that's being shared. So you want to kind of keep an open frame, so that it once again paints the picture that you're willing to listen and receive, and you're eager to get that information. You want to also maintain an erect posture. You don't want to be slumped over or leaning back or to the side, because that can sometimes provide somewhat of a distraction for the presenter, and then it gives you, it kind of can cause a breach within that communication, going back to those communication barriers, and it can really kind of lend itself to a negative light. And then you want to maintain eye contact. So as much as possible, you want to continue to look in the individual's eyes, look at the screen, make sure you are identifying a way for you to continue to keep that communication going between yourself and the individuals who you're communicating with virtually. And then the last aspect of effective communication is you want to make sure that you keep the communication positive. When you're in a remote setting, oftentimes it is really hard to know emotions and be able to communicate effectively to where individuals aren't feeling like they're being lectured to. So as much as possible, you want to try to, even if you having to provide some kind of disciplinary conversations, or having a more of a tough conversation with your employees, you want to try to make sure you do it in a way that it comes across as, yes, you're trying to help coach and you're trying to help develop and you're trying to help individuals grow as it relates to them becoming better remote employees. But if it comes off as being all negative, then a lot of times it won't be received well. And because you're in a remote environment, you may not have the positive impact that you are hoping to have if you are maybe able to meet with that individual in a face-to-face setting. So the next strategy is creating a virtual team building environment. So with remote employees, you want to be able to, just like you would do in a face-to-face setting, you want to be able to build some type of virtual camaraderie and some virtual team building, so that employees know that, going back to what I was saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So having those virtual teams and virtual team building environments just helps to lend itself to increased productivity when you do have to work together, maybe say together if you're on an online team, or if you're having to collaborate with others who may be in different parts of the country or different geographical regions, or just even if they're in different industries and you're having to work with people in different sectors. So a couple of strategies for how to create some virtual team building things. One is to kind of create online social hours, or online happy hours, where basically this gives you an opportunity to kind of take work off the table for maybe an hour or two when you're trying to, and this could be done after work hours, so it does not have to be done during the time where you are really wanting to focus on maybe working with clients and working with your customers. It can be after hours, just like if you were, say, working at an office from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then maybe you would go and have maybe a social hour or happy hour after that. But doing these things, the reason why this is important in a remote setting is because oftentimes in remote settings, employees can start to feel very isolated and disconnected from their team members and from the organization as a whole. Oftentimes, if there's no social aspect to working for an organization, it can become really hard to know if you feel valued by your managers or by the senior leadership to an organization. So having these social hours and these happy hours can really help. And the way that you could do that in a remote setting is pretty much you agree upon a time. So you have your team to say what time this week or what time this month are we wanting to do our social hour or our happy hour. And at that time, everybody comes together. So say if you say at 6 p.m., we're going to get together and we're going to do an hour of social hour. You get together, you bring your favorite beverage, and then during that time, you kind of set your own parameters. So for instance, for us, we would do, say, for an hour, we're not going to talk about any projects. We're not going to talk about anything work related. We're just going to try to get to know our team members, because we know that oftentimes we work better together when we get to know our employees and when our employees get to know us a little bit more. So we would just basically have conversation starters. So we will get to know our team by asking things like, what are some of your hobbies? What's an interesting fact about you that maybe you haven't told anyone, or maybe you've only told a few people? You could also ask questions like, what is your dream vacation? Get people to start talking about things that really motivate them and inspire them, and things that are personal to them, because after people start doing that and start fellowshipping with one another and collaborating with one another, then it just helps to create a more pleasant environment. So that way, when you start to work with, those individuals on specific projects, then now that individual feels like they're not just working with someone that they don't know, they're working with a friend or they're working with a colleague, and that helps to increase the productivity levels. Also, you want to be able to create regular things like I called it like a get to know your team rotation. And basically this is something that could be done just through technology. So say if you as a leader are sending out regular communication, whether that's through a memorandum that you send out maybe once a week or once a month or however often you do it, maybe a section of that memo or that email that you send out, you can highlight one of your team members. And on this, you're just basically maybe provide a picture of who that individual is, maybe a picture of their family, and then maybe a couple of things about that individual, just to kind of, let others on the team know who this employee is, kind of some things that they would want you to know, similar to like the social hour where you're just talking about their hobbies, what's their favorite food, what are some things that they like to enjoy when they're not working. Just giving employees an opportunity to get to know their team members more. And then also employees will start to look forward to the time when they're going to be the one that's being featured in some kind of segment, like a get to know you like that. So that's a good way to do that. And it could even be done, say if you're doing a virtual meeting, and it could be you take the first 5 minutes of the meeting before you get started into the actual content that you want to cover that day. You just maybe have a PowerPoint slide where you have a picture of that individual. You kind of go through a couple of things about them, and then you move on to the next segment of your meeting. Then you want to be able to participate in things such as like, virtual game nights. Like for instance, for here in the United States, what we have done and what we found beneficial is providing some kind of team builder where in a face-to-face setting, normally we would do something like we would get the office together, say if it was a big quarter for us, and we were having some really, really aggressive goals that we wanted to accomplish. We would say if we hit our goals, we would take everybody out to maybe like an amusement park, or we would take them out to dinner as a team, and they could bring their families, or we would do something like that. Well, in a setting where you have remote employees, you may not be able to do that, especially if they are in different geographical areas. So in things like that, we may do something like, hey, if we hit our goals, we will do something like a team night, a game night. And there are lots of companies that are around that basically provide online gaming to where it's like an hour to an hour and a half where you get together as a team, and then they kind of moderate how you have entertainment. And there's games that you play in your house, like scavenger hunts, or they may help walk you through, doing some type of fun activities where they group you up and team members. You go to different breakout rooms. Everybody's kind of competing together, and then they bring you back together and you tally up your points. And there's a moderator who helps to kind of make sure that you stay on track as a team. And it's kind of a fun thing because although you're doing it virtually, you feel like you're actually with your colleagues, with your other team members, and it just helps to build that camaraderie. So it's just giving some creative ways to think outside of the box. Then the last one about creating virtual team building opportunities is to kind of create virtual book clubs. So similar to like the happy hours and the social hours, you can agree upon a time if it was once a month or once a week, or how often you ever want to meet. And as a team, you may agree upon reading a specific book. It could be a leadership book. Say, for instance, if you're meeting with your team of managers, you guys may want to start going through a book that helps with how to manage, for instance, remote employees. There's books out there that you can read, and then say you may read a couple chapters, and then you come together in a virtual setting, and as a leadership team, you start to talk about what did I get from reading the first 3 chapters of this book. How can I put those things into place in my environment as I'm managing the employees that I'm managing? So it just kind of allows, us as remote employees to continue to stay engaged, to continue to work together as a team, and to continue to build that camaraderie that is so necessary when you are actually working with some remote employees. The 4th strategy is having regularly scheduled meetings. And this may seem obvious, but a lot of times in remote settings, it can be very easy to get into a habit of not having regularly scheduled meetings because you're not seeing your team members and your employees every single day. So there are a few things that you can do to kind of make sure that you have regularly scheduled meetings. And I broke it down into three different types. One type is you want to have one-on-one meetings. One-on-one meetings with your employees are very important because it gives you a chance to really get to know your employees on a more personal level. The things that I was just sharing before when you're doing your team building activities, it's a good way to get to know employees and get employees to open up a little bit and to kind of let their walls down as it relates to when they're interacting with you as a manager and as a leader. However, there are going to be some things you can only get through having those one-on-one conversations. And from my experience, when I've been working in, industry and face-to-face settings, but also when I worked together in remote environments, when I was managing employees who were, in different time zones and in different parts of the country, I found that one-on-ones was probably the most impactful meetings that I could have. And the way that I typically would organize my meetings, which was something that I learned when I was being coached and developed and into getting into leadership roles, is to break down my one-on-one meetings into three segments. One, the first segment is I want to get to know how my employees are doing. I want to find out what's going on in their personal lives. What is something that's going on that's outside of work that could be negatively affecting their work environment or positively affecting their work environment. For instance, if that individual may be having some challenges, maybe with illness in their family, or say they may have issues with maybe parenting, or maybe they have some relationship issues that is going on, then as a manager, that helps me to kind of have the right mindset on how I need to continue to conduct the rest of the meeting. It doesn't mean that I change the content that I'm going to be sharing with them, especially if it's, say, a performance review, but it helps me to understand that I know that my employee is dealing with some other things outside of work in their everyday lives. So maybe that changes my delivery method, and I may not necessarily deliver the message as harshly or as directly as if they weren't having those types of situations going on. Because if I do it too harsh, then it may further affect their performance at work. So I want to always start out by, just asking that, how are you doing? Is there anything going on outside of work? And this just kind of gives you a glimpse inside of kind of what helps to motivate those employees, which is what we'll get to here in a little bit. The second part of having those one-on-one meetings is I want to know kind of what's happening. How do they assess their current performance? Like, what's going on at work? What are some things that they are enjoying? What are some things that they maybe not be enjoying as much? This gives me a chance to kind of hear from them about kind of where they feel like they are in terms of their performance and in terms of, how they feel about, their work. This is very important, especially in a remote environment, because this is where you start to find out if an employee feels connected, if they feel like they are a part of a team, if they feel like they're being supported, even though they're not coming into the office every day. So you want to kind of give employees the opportunity to really share how things are going right now as it relates to work. And then the last part of the meeting, of the one-on-one meeting, is for me to find out how as a leader can help this employee to develop professionally. What are some of their goals? Where do they want to be in the next 12 months? Where do they want to be in the next 3 years? Where do they see themselves long-term, 5 years or down or further down the line? And then I want to help come up with a plan with that employee to make sure that they're able to move in an area that they want to move into. Because going back to what I mentioned before, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Me giving them an opportunity to share what's going on in their personal lives, to kind of give me an assessment of how they feel like they're doing currently in their role, and then for me to be invested in their future growth and their future development as a leader. It helps to open them up. So those one-on-one meetings generally are going to be about an hour of your time, and you decide how often you want to meet with them. You know, there's been some places where when I used to manage a team of 7 people, it was easy for me to do one-on-one meetings probably once every couple of weeks. But when I was working, managing 75 people at one time, I probably only got a chance to do one-on-ones maybe once a month with individuals, or once every other month, just depending on what was going on. So as a leader, you have to determine how often you need to be able to do those one-on-ones, but it's very important to know that you need to be doing one-on-ones. The second type of meeting that is really important to have regularly scheduled is team meetings. So you want to be able to have regularly scheduled team meetings, because oftentimes you may be getting meetings with your senior leadership, or you may be communicating with your customers and your clients, but oftentimes if you don't call the team together, then one, it helps to make sure everyone knows that we're in this meeting, we're in this thing together as an organization, as a team, and it allows for team members to come together and bring things that they may be learning in the field. They may be learning from interacting with customers. They may be learning from, you know, if they're, say, a customer service employee, they may be being able to bring information back to these team meetings to be able to offer best practices to the entire team. There may be things that you can discover in one-on-ones, but oftentimes that message gets kind of distorted a little bit if you're not allowing individuals to kind of have communication all at once and hear the same message. Team meetings are important because it basically allows for the leaders to have a uniform message to go out to employees, especially when you're trying to communicate goals, company objectives. If you're trying to talk about the overall direction of the company and you're wanting to share where the company is headed, then it's better to do that in a team meeting setting, because when you do it in a team meeting setting, everyone gets the same message. There's nothing left up to chance. There's no one who can say, oh, I took this away from the meeting, where somebody else says they got something else from the meeting. So you want to be able to have those regularly scheduled team meetings. And like one-on-ones, you want to try to do these pretty regularly. So oftentimes you may want to have a weekly team meeting just to make sure everyone knows where we are and where we stand as an organization. And it does help if you're going to have your regularly scheduled team meetings every week at the same time, every month at the same time. For example, you may say the first Monday of every month, we're going to have a team meeting at 5 p.m. And that basically gives people an opportunity to go ahead and put that time in their schedule. They know not to block. They know not to put things else, other things into that time slot, so that they know that when it's time for that third Monday at 5 p.m. every month, they know that they're going to be having a team meeting. And it kind of lets people have something to look forward to. And then the third type of regularly scheduled meeting you want to have is you want to have leadership team meetings. And this is very important because it allows for leaders within your organization to discuss things that may be not necessarily able to be discussed when you're trying to have a group team meeting. So say if you're trying to discuss tactical strategies and you're trying to come up with ways to set realistic goals for your team, that's not necessarily a team meeting discussion. So maybe it's you as the head manager, and then you may have mid-level managers who you can pull into some of those strategic planning sessions and say, okay, where do we want to go as it relates to, the direction of our company and the goals we want to achieve. And sometimes the leadership meetings maybe require a little bit more open and honest discussion amongst the leaders within the organization. So that is why you want to have these meetings, because you can be a little bit more open about maybe employee performance. You can talk about how realistic is it for us to be able to reach our company objectives. You just want to be able to be in a place where you can kind of freely have discussions without feeling like you have to kind of monitor if you're going to, say something that you shouldn't, as if you were having a meeting and you had your employees right there in front of you. So leadership meetings are important, and these probably are the ones you want to have more frequently, even if it was a short, once or twice a day. You could have a short team meeting. Like when I used to work in the industry and I was managing a group of 15 people, it was just a small management team of myself and 2 other managers, but we would meet every morning before the day got started for about 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And we would just talk about what we wanted to accomplish during the day, what goals that we have set for each of our sales staff, and then who would go into, like, who would coach certain individuals. So instead of me as the general manager having to coach 15 employees, we would break it up. I would coach 5 employees. My other assistant manager would coach 5 employees, and my other assistant manager would coach 5 employees. So that allowed me to focus solely on a specific group of individuals and not try to focus so much on a large group, which could kind of hinder my effectiveness in trying to be able to make sure I gave the right attention to individuals. So having those small team meetings, 10 to 15, 20 minutes before each day, or maybe a couple of times a week, it just kind of helps you to have the open communication that you'll need, especially in a remote environment, because in a remote environment, you're gonna have to have a strong leadership team in order to be able to make sure you're communicating with the other remote employees as it scales out and as it gets to a larger team. And then the last strategy that I'll cover today, before we get to the Q&A session, is going to be celebrating employees. So with remote work, because I mentioned the opportunity for remote employees to kind of feel isolated, to kind of feel disconnected, to kind of feel like their contributions to the team aren't necessarily being valued, it's important to make sure that as a remote leader, that we are able to manage how we motivate our employees. And this can be done by a couple of things. And I know you guys had a session a few days ago on how to motivate employees. So maybe you covered this a little bit, but I want to primarily talk about 2 types of motivation on how you can motivate employees. One is intrinsic motivation, which basically is internal motivation, which that involves how we as employees and as individuals are internally motivated. So this involves things like I may engage in behavior or doing certain actions based off of it being personally rewarding for me. So it's not necessarily I'm looking for something external, but I may want to work for this organization because maybe the mission of the company aligns with my values, or maybe I feel like the organization provides a good way of life for me. So that helps to align with my personal values, my personal beliefs. And because of that, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a good job every single day I go to work, because I appreciate having a job that shows me how much they care, or I appreciate having a job that I feel like I see myself in the vision of the organization, and I can go out and I can share that vision with whoever I need to share that vision with, as it relates to customers, as it relates to if I'm prospecting new business or whatever that is. So I'm intrinsically motivated because I am basically satisfied with the job without needing any type of external reward or benefit for that. It's just it helps me to know that I am good at what I do every single day. Now, there is another type of motivation, which is extrinsic motivation, which basically that is external motivation. And that is the one that, maybe comes to mind first when we're thinking about how to motivate our employees. And extrinsic motivation occurs when we are motivated to perform a behavior or engage in an activity in order to earn an award or in order to avoid punishment. So some examples of this is if I am a sales manager and I am looking to get a bonus at the end of the year, then I am extrinsically motivated because I am trying to do the best I can to motivate my team so that at the end of the year, when the company sends bonuses out, I want to be a part of that bonus structure. So I am working hard to get that reward. Or as an employee, I may say, I want to work hard. Say, for instance, when I was managing some sales members, sales team members, I would always do contests probably every week. And one example would be, I may say, whoever has the highest number of sales this week, then I am going to give you an extra half a day off from work. So everybody who's a part of the sales team will work really hard during the week to try to see if they could be that individual who end up having the highest sales revenue for the week so that they can get an extra half a day off. And that half a day off at the end of the next week wouldn't be something that they would have to use their personal time, for instance, like vacation time or something like that. It would be time that I would use as manager discretion to give them time off. And it was a reward that they got for going out and working hard and doing their best each and every day. So that would be an example of extrinsic motivation as it relates to going for a reward. Now, extrinsic motivation can also be an employee not wanting to be punished. For instance, if an employee feels like I have to go out and I have to work hard every day, I got to do these certain things so that I don't get disciplined or get put on some type of performance improvement plan, or so I don't lose my job, that's also a form of extrinsic motivation, because in that way, employees are motivated by trying to keep their job and trying not to be put in a position to where they are, having to find new work at the end of whatever time frame it is, if it's 60 days or 90 days, if they don't get better as far as improving. So celebrating employees can be very important. And it's really important to know as a manager, as a leader, how our employees are motivated. Because oftentimes as employees, we are motivated differently at different stages of our career, different ages, just at different things that may be going on in life. I know for me personally, when I was doing my career, I was probably more extrinsically motivated because I was looking for external rewards, and I was looking to move up. I was maybe looking for the promotion. I was looking for maybe more money or higher pay. So I was really extrinsically motivated. Whereas as I got more into my career, and I've been working for now over 15 years in various industries, I'm not necessarily as extrinsically motivated as I was before. Now I'm more intrinsically motivated because now I want to be working for organizations who help me to feel like I have more of a purpose in life, or that I have more value, and I find the work that I do as more satisfying, and I don't necessarily have to get another promotion or increase income or things like that, because now I'm aligning my work with the company vision and the core values. So as we kind of think about managing remote employees, it's important to, going back to having the one-on-ones, making sure that we're talking to our employees and finding out, what motivates them. Um, One thing that I remember when I was working, and I was actually working as an employee at this time, one of the managers that really had an impact on my life was they created a form that was basically titled How I Want to Be Coached. And it was a form that managers gave to employees. And basically, I would fill out this form whenever I got a new manager. It was something I would fill out this form, and I would basically talk about what motivates me as an individual, what are some things that I value, what are some things that makes me upset as an employee, what are some things that makes me happy or makes me feel more productive. And it would be just a one-page document. And after I filled that document out, then myself and the manager would sit down in our next one-on-one, and we would kind of have a discussion about that document. And we would talk through the different points. And that basically allowed me an opportunity to kind of share some things about what motivated me, how I basically felt appreciated, how I wanted to be celebrated as an employee, and it gave the manager a glimpse inside of how to really know how to work with me and how to develop that rapport and that relationship with me that was going to be needed as working with remote employees. So that is definitely something that can be used by anybody, especially when we're in a remote environment. We can try to kind of have that segment in place so that when we meet with our individual employees, it can just kind of guide your initial one-on-one conversation and be able to find out, okay, how can I help to support you in a remote environment? And that could be a good starting place for how you can kind of continue to build upon that remote work. So that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation portion, and I wanted to open it up to questions and answers. And if you guys, even after this presentation is over, if anyone has questions, then you can always connect with me on any of these platforms here, just by searching for the @Dr. Gabriel Warren name, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as I can. But I am going to stop sharing here, and then that will allow you to have some questions for me. So let me get back over to that. All right, so we are back. So I'll open it up for any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, Dr. Warren, we have few questions in the chat box. I will put forward to them one by one and request you to please answer. The first
Okay.
question here I can see is from Somishri. She is asking, she wants to know if remote work is possible and going well, then why employer compelled to travel and HR creates a roster for employees to come to office and work in industries other than IT sector, for example?
So I believe that what I have learned is prior to this whole global pandemic, there were still a lot of people who didn't really understand how to effectively work in a remote environment. But I think given the situation that has happened over the past several months, more and more people, and that includes HR workers, have started to understand the effectiveness of working in a remote environment and how you can still be productive. Going back to that, one of the first slides that I mentioned here, the study that was done here in the United States, where they surveyed over 500 companies, and 76% of the owners of those companies, those 500 companies that were surveyed, said they were able to see increased productivity by the ability to work remote because there's less distractions. So if you think about working in an environment, for instance, how many times do we say, for instance, if we were going to work every day, we waste a lot of time by just maybe going to maybe like a coworker's office, and we may sit and we may talk about maybe what happened over the weekend, or we may be talking about what our plans are once we get done with work, or you may be in the break room and you may spend a little extra time talking with people or around the water cooler. And a lot of times all of that time adds up, and it can kind of lend itself to decreased productivity. Whereas if you're in a remote environment and say you have a good remote space, then you can sit down at your computer, or like I mentioned before, if you were outside or somewhere like that, you say if you were going to a coffee shop, you could sit, you could put in some music, and you could really focus for several hours. That will allow you to probably get more done, as opposed to if you were going to the office every day and you were getting distracted by people coming by your office. So I just think that IT was probably the first people to do it, because they were the ones who had to create the platforms. But now we are starting to see more people do that, especially with what's been happening here lately. All of us have been kind of forced to kind of have some level of remote work. So thanks for that question.
Okay. The next question is, in this remote work situation, should all organizations not give the employees work from home expenses in terms of bonus or waiver to support them as they save from office admin overheads, etc.? What are
Yes,
your
I
views
think
regarding this?
Yes, I think employers should have a way to support their employees, especially when it comes down to, offering the support that they need as it relates to administrative stuff. And even when it comes down to providing supplies, like if an employee needs a computer at home that maybe is a little newer, or say if there's a certain type of platform that they need in order to get their work done. Maybe purchasing that platform and allowing the employee to be able to access that in their home environment, or so that they can be able to be effective on their job, because it will be a little unrealistic, in my opinion, to allow employees to work remote, but then not offer the support they need to be successful in a remote environment. So when I think about working remotely, I think about that statement that I mentioned before, making sure that employees know that you care about them as a company. And that means that providing them with all the resources that they need, so that they can be successful and feel appreciated.
Right. Another question I can see here from Rupali. She is asking, how can the expectation of the employees as well as the employer be managed in remote work areas?
And I'm assuming we're saying, how can the expectation be managed as it relates to maybe like communication or performance? And I would just say, in a remote environment, is really important to, going back to what I was saying about communication, really have that conversation about what is truly expected of me as a remote employee. So if I'm a manager, I think it is my responsibility in a remote setting to let employees know how often I want to be in communication with them. So I may have to communicate that we need to have, a call, or we may have to get on something like Google Meets once or twice a day, and we want to be able to communicate, what we're doing. So maybe in the morning we'll have a Google Meet, and I lay out my expectations and say, hey, today we want to work on these goals, these different objectives. And then we may talk via phone maybe around midday to see kind of where that individual is. And then before the shift is over, at the end of the afternoon, we may have another Google Meet and say, what were we able to accomplish today? Or I just may say, hey, email me to let me know what you were able to kind of accomplish as it relates to accomplishing our goals. But for some employees, they may need that kind of direction and strategy. Whereas I may have some employees who I may say, I'm going to check in with you once every other day, or once a week because they may be self-starters and they may know what those expectations are, and how to kind of work on their own in a remote setting. So I think it goes back to communication and really finding out how often you want to get information back from your employees, because that's what's going to really cause some conflict if you're expecting them to respond to your email within an hour or a couple of hours and it's taking them maybe several hours to get back to you. If you've not communicated that, then it can cause some problems.
Okay. Another question is from Ms. Lopamutra. She is asking how industries can implement work remotely. What could be the possible functions of industry to work remotely and also save overheads? So she is referring specifically to industries.
Yeah, so I mean, I think most industries now can work remotely. When you're thinking about one, of course, higher education. If you think about what's happening now, like I know my institution, we have as an institution decided to predominantly for this semester, the fall semester, to go all online or some type of hybrid setting. So the majority of our classes are going to be offered in a setting like this, Google Meets, but primarily we're going to use as an institution Zoom. And that is going to help to reduce overhead because whereas we had 5,000 students who normally come to campus every fall, and we probably have another 300 faculty members and then another 100 to 200 staff members all on campus, going back to what I was saying, using office space, using utilities, using the bathrooms, and you have utility bills and paper in the office and all that stuff. That's reducing that overhead cost. And higher education is not just the only industry. You have all of these other industries, like even our banking industry, who for a while, for the first couple of months, they were really reducing down their staff to where the banking industry was not allowing individuals to go into banks. They could only use the drive-through. That helped to reduce the overhead of having to always have so many people in the actual bank on a daily basis, where normally you would have to have bank tellers, you would have to have the office employees who would help to open up new accounts and maybe loan advisors and things like that. But during that time, everything was done remotely, except for if you needed to go to the bank to make deposits, and you could do that in a remote setting, just going to the drive-through. So that's a way that you could kind of start out by just really trying to do different. If there's jobs that you feel like you can do from home that can be a little bit more effective, you can try those positions first and then branch out to other positions. And it's one thing where you can try for, say, a month and see how it works. And then you reevaluate with that employee and say, okay, let's see how you did this month. If they were very productive, you could try for another month, or you extend it a little bit. If they weren't productive, you could say, okay, we're going to have to come back to doing it more traditionally. But it's kind of going to be a trial and error because everybody works differently when it comes down to remote work, and everybody's home situation or their remote work situation could be a little different.
Okay. Another question here is, sir, as we are always connected even at home, seems to have more or extended working hours comparatively what we used to spend in office. Please explain the reason and control measures as well.
Yes, and I completely agree with that, especially working like in your home environment, because you always have the office equipment there with you. What I recommend as a control measure for me is to try to set specific hours that you're going to be working. And then also make sure, if you're able to, try to create somewhat of a office space for yourself. So you want to kind of have a place where you know you go to do work. So I do not recommend doing it like, say, for instance, in your living area or say in your bedroom, because those are areas where normally they're designed for you to kind of relax and kind of decompress from, say, a work day. And if you're not creating that separation, not having a dedicated workspace, then it's going to kind of bleed over into pretty much every aspect of your life. So if you say have a dedicated office space or an office table that you know, I'm going to sit here at this desk or I'm going to sit at this table and this is where I'm going to do my work from 8 in the morning until 12 in the afternoon, or from 1 o'clock in the afternoon till 5 p.m. And then at 5 p.m., have an alarm set on your computer or on your cellular phone that goes off to remind you that work time is up. At that point, stop what you're doing, close down your computer, put it away, and then leave that workspace until you're ready to go back and do your work. And that is a way that you can kind of help create a little balance there.
Okay. And one last question. She's asking if you could highlight this work from home concept, how it has changed the employer growth life of HR in terms of work style managing, and how this new normal for long-term remote working will impact in future. Also, if you can relate to your organization and recite some examples.
Yes. So I think the way that it's changed employer growth is it basically has allowed for us to have more employees. The biggest thing that we've gotten from a situation where we were able to go remote is kind of what I mentioned in the PowerPoint. We were able to find ways to recruit a variety of skill sets. So if, for instance, in where I work, the university I work, sometimes most higher education institutions, if you're in a rural or a remote setting, it can be difficult at times to recruit employees to come and move and live in those rural or those remote areas. So having the ability to offer remote work will allow for you to be able to increase the potential of candidates that we would typically get to apply for jobs, because at that point they're able to see that they can still be in their area but be effective in doing their job in a place that they may not necessarily be able to move to. And that has helped us to be able to recruit people from all around the country and be able to help to create a better experience for our students as it relates to them getting a diverse set of candidates, because a diverse set of faculty members, because what we don't want as an institution is to not prepare our students for going out and working in a diverse world, because we know that the world is becoming more and more diverse on many different levels. And for us as managers, especially in the higher education industry, we have to make sure that we're preparing our students to be able to work in settings where they may not be as comfortable working with individuals who are different nationalities or maybe different religious beliefs, or they may just be, on different levels of the spectrum when it comes down to diversity. And that has really helped, because in my institution specifically, we have people who are from not only from the United States working, but we have people who are from Indonesia, we have people who are from India, we have people from South Korea, we have people who are from Germany, we have people, of course, from America who are working on staff, and that really helps to provide a better overall experience for our students. And long term, I think that's going to really help, because those students are getting experiences that they would never have gotten just by if we only focused on recruiting individuals who are a part of our rural city and not be able to expand beyond that. So it's going to definitely have a long-term impact on our organization as well as the students that we service.
Okay, Dr. Warren, these were the few questions that were put forward by our participants today. We would like to thank you for accepting our request and joining us today and speaking on a topic which is more so essential in these trying and changing times, challenging times. You really gave a very holistic idea of the remote work. Thank you very much for joining with us today. Thank you, Dr. Warren.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to, if you guys have any more questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to answer those as they come by.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warren.
All right, you all have a great day.
Same to you. Thank you.